It's like Fisher's Hook, but different.
So, thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak with you tonight. One of the reasons we wanted to come talk to you is our staff has been engaging in some personal, professional development. One of the things that we sent you a handout earlier about some culture and climate work that we were doing in the building. And one of the things from some of the data that we collected from surveying the staff about professional development is that they wanted to have time for personalized professional development that had meaning for them so that they could do something for the building and actually use it in their practice. And so my son, who was a fourth grader at the time, was engaging in some Genius Hour projects in his elementary classroom. And so I thought it might be an interesting thing to try with staff. So basically, the staff has embraced the Genius Hour concept, which was it's set up to use about 20% of their professional development time in order to research and develop new lessons, innovative practices, research tools, look for grants, study literature, things that they think that they could use in their practice. And some, as you know, some teachers have developed new classes even, including the Total Fitness program that we have as a result of this, the Total Fitness class that we're piloting next year at East. There we go. So there's just basically 3 requirements for these projects. Number 1, there must be a driving question. Number 2, they must include supporting research that leads to new learning because they are counting it as professional development. And then finally, they must be willing to share their project in some way at some point. And so I had some teachers and a counselor approach me. And one of the driving questions that we have been asking a lot at school, and this is sort of the driving question behind their research, is how can we support students with mental health or social emotional struggles using specialized resources? So we have the resources we have, and we're grateful and blessed for those things, but they've done a really nice job thinking outside of the box about how they can support our kids, and they're just asking that you take a few minutes to take a look at their research. So I'm going to start with Michelle Lindsay. She's one of our special education teachers, and she is going to talk about a project that she and another teacher have been working on.
Okay. So I'm Michelle Lindsay. I'm the special ed facilitator over at South Lyon East, and I'm also the 504 coordinator for both high schools. One thing that we realized more than anything is I'm usually one of the many people that are first line of defense for our crisis situations or students that are coming into school in crisis. Also part of the MTSS process, parents having concerns with their kids with anxiety, how to get them to school, depression, and making those reports and how to support them. So myself and my colleague Jeremy Noka started thinking, how can we support them and give them a way to get them in the door? And then once we're in the door, how can we then facilitate and support them throughout the day? So some of the mental health background that we studied was kind of alarming and kind of eye-opening, both from a Michigan standpoint and then also taking into account just the data from South Lyon East from September till December. So some of the information that we had is, I'm going to skip through this, is the purpose of it is basically to create an environment for students to relax, teach them self-regulation, how to get back into their class with their emotions, transition to the schools and the class, and practice some coping strategies. And not just, I need to go home or I'm sick and getting those somatic complaints. And more importantly, to just show that school is a safe place for them. So some of the stuff that we looked at from the Department of Health and Human Sciences were depression symptoms. So if we broke it down from male to female, in Michigan, we were about 27%, where the US average was around 21. Females, 48% compared to 41% in the US. When we looked at suicidal attempts and thoughts-related injuries, again, we were elevated compared to the US. So males were 16% and females were 27% compared to the 12% and 22%. These were high school students who reported that they seriously considered attempting suicide within the last 12 months. This was kind of eye-opening for me. So when you look at the first statistic there, suicidal thoughts have decreased 30% since '97. But the thing that was alarming is that actually students have increased the suicides have increased more than 50% in the last 10 years. So even though the thoughts are down, they're acting and following through more. And the reasons are bullying, the LGBTQ youth, lots of trauma, physical, sexual assaults, dating violence, and then others that were injured in physical fights that have been treated by doctors outside. Again, this is just a little bit more that talks about the young adults in Michigan. 32% had feelings of depression, 17% considered suicide, 15 made a plan to attempt it, and 9% attempted at least once. And then when you look at our data from South Lyon East, it's kind of on par with that. So again, we're looking at emotional and behavioral disorders, anxiety, bipolar, depression. Again, 50% of the students with emotional and behavioral disabilities, ages 14 and older, drop out of high school. So again, we're trying to retain, especially those ninth graders, to give them the supports to get them through high school. And this is the highest dropout rate of any disability group. So when we looked at South Lyon East data, basically what it came down to is, of our Learning 504 plans just at East, 26 out of the 57 of them were for anxiety and depression. 61 out of our 118 students with special needs required IEP support for services for anxiety, depression, whether that's behavior plans, counseling, or co-taught teaching. When we looked at our safety plans for suicidal ideations, so far this school year, we've had 30 or more assessments for ideation, but no identified plan. 10 students are currently on safety plans for suicide ideations, and 3 out of those 10 students were referred to hospitalization for 10 or more days. And of those, 4 out of 10 students had multiple assessments and revisions to the safety plans throughout the year. So they've had 2, 3, 4 revisions to that safety plan.
At South Lyon East alone, we've done over 30 from September till December. That's an alarming number. I was actually kind of thrown back when I saw how high the number was, and that's what kind of sparked this endeavor that we want to undertake.
And a lot of the students that came in, again, it goes back to those coping strategies. They just feel they're overwhelmed, whether it be school or home life, and they have no way out, and this is the only solution. And we're hoping that with our proposal or our Genius Hour plan, that this will give them some other resources. Again, we're looking at just the socioeconomic disadvantaged students compared, so if you broke it down by grades, 10 or more days absent of schools, which would increase that anxiety. 29 students, 16 of them are considered economically disadvantaged, 20 in 10th grade, 21 in 11th grade, and 45 senior year. And then, so this is just, again, just showing you a breakdown from depression, anxiety, and behavior disorders. Again, it shows that at the high school age, this is where it's the most prevalent. And I'm going to pass it off to our proposal to Mr. Noka.
Talk quite a bit louder than most. So the idea behind this one is to create what we kind of refer to as a send-in. We took this idea, we actually did a field trip to Okemos High School. And we met with the director of counseling, showed us their room, showed us their data, how they track students. The idea behind the Zen-Den is that we're going to create an area for the students that even aren't identified yet, just students that are heightened anxiety. It could be due to midterms. They could have had a rough morning. They could have had a rough night, whatever it is. The idea behind this is if we can keep a student in the classroom, keep the student from going home, that's one more day that we're educating that student. If a student gets to a level where they can't return to school or they can't finish the day out, that student is losing another day of education. And our goal is to keep those students, retain those students, ultimately retaining FTEs. We want to retain those students in our schools, in our district. If we provide a place for them that's welcoming, that it's supportive, we can identify students through this program that may not be on a plan, but we can identify them through the use of this room. So through tracking, the students will have to sign in, sign out. We will be tracking it weekly, monthly as we progress. And even if students aren't on plans with counselors, if we see students using the room once, twice, 3 times, if we see the same students using it, that kind of prompts us to start looking at counseling and looking at our students who might not be identified, but through this program, it's an easier way to identify those students who are using it. And it's also something we can recommend our students who are coming in. Again, we can't control what happens when they leave school, but when they come to school, they're our responsibility. So what are we going to do with those students that is responsible? We want to keep those students in our building. They fall less behind, the anxiety decreases, and those students start enjoying coming to school. The ultimate idea is we have a counseling office, a conference room within our main office. Right now, it's currently being used for some storage things and some small meetings. Met with administration. It's a perfect location. It's right next to our counselors. It's inside student services, and it's right next to our administration offices. So any student that comes down will pass through 1, 2, 3 layers of staff members before utilizing this room. We want to clear out the room and put in some softer furniture, some bean bags, some lower lighting, and kind of create an area that's not a sensory room. We don't want it to be activity-based. We want it to be strictly anxiety-reducing. So we're kind of proposing doing a small water feature. I made a couple visits to other schools on my own time. There's a bubble feature. The kids can kind of do the bubble feature. We're looking at putting a positive mural on the wall, some motivational quotes on the wall, just some affirmations for students that come in. Students will be in the room, and this is kind of how we have it set up. Students will check in with student services. There's a couple different ideas I'm throwing around. One of the districts is using a QR code. So I'm kind of going to take a look at adapting the QR code, how students sign in. Students will be in there. Our goal is no more than 10 minutes, but also that's up to the student. If the student is having a difficult time coming back, it's up to the counselor, it's up to the caseload manager, kind of how we determine how long the student's going to stay in there. They have to check in their phones. They can't have their backpacks. They can't work on schoolwork, and they can't bring in a buddy. So it's not a place for kids to go to avoid class. It's not a place to go to try and skip something, because it's not designed to be that way. We want to limit the activities. We want to limit the amount of things that they can have access to in there. And it's simply just a room, calm music. It's a very calming room. Most students, as we spoke with the counselor at Okemos, most students don't even make it to 10 minutes. 7, 8, when they track the students, they have them sign in and sign out. They looked at the times. Most students are spending between 5 and 8 minutes. Again, they do have a few students that might take 10, 20, 30 minutes, but it's on those extreme basis, and they handle those as they come. Counselors check in. Whenever a student signs in, student services will send an email to the caseload manager if they have one. The counselor and administration let him know the student's in the room. Student will not be forgotten in the room. The student's not going to spend more than 10 minutes. Someone will check in with them in the first 10 minutes. Also, when the students come in, I'm going to work on training our student services secretary. The idea is if a student comes in and they're visibly distraught, they are not to enter the room by themselves. Obviously, we want to look at the safety issues. I'm not going to let a student enter a room by themselves if they're invisible, distraught. But they can kind of make the determination as a student comes in. If that's the point, they will advise them, a counselor, to come down, escort that student to the room, and the counselor will remain with that student in the room if they are at a risk at that time. This is a version, so we went to Okemos, we took a few pictures. They had the same thing. They have 3 counseling offices. One wasn't being utilized. And this is kind of a room. They had this set up. Again, they made it just very simple. It's a low boy couch. They have a desk in there. They have a small water feature. And they have some coloring books. The students can color or they can draw. It's very minimal, but again, it's designed to not be overwhelming. It's designed to not have too many things on the walls. It's meant to come and sit. So this is what their room looks like. Again, it's pretty basic, but they want to keep it basic. This is the room that we're proposing using. So this is, if you've been to East, it's in the Student Services office. And the idea behind this is we want to kind of make 2 separate areas within there. So we're proposing to have a couch sitting area and then kind of a lounge area with a couple of the beanbag chairs. It has windows along the doors. We'll have a sign in, sign out thing. And it's going to be very basic. The lights, it actually works out perfect. The main lights shut down. We do have a dimmable light switch in there that actually shuts the lights almost down. And then on the one wall, there's actually 4 natural light windows that come in from our commons. So the students have natural light also coming into that room. So in a sense, when the main lights are off, that room's already kind of calm.
And the biggest thing that we like is just the data collection that we can do from the check-in and check-out is not only identifying what their feelings are, but what coping strategies they use and what they're utilizing, so that we can either add to a change and adapt it and follow through with that after.
So the students will come in, they'll get it's a half sheet. It's already kind of filled in on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being content, 10 being in complete distress. So this is kind of like that quick check-in that the counselor or the student services secretary will use to determine where the students are at that point. Then they select 2 or 3 words that they're feeling at that point. If there's something else not listed, it's meant to be really easy. The students can circle it. And then when they check out, it's very similar, but they also check out to see if they decreased their level of anxiety or distress. And then they circle things that they did while they were in there. And I kind of put this in there a little bit differently than what Okemos did, because I want to see what the students are actually utilizing in that room, and if we want to provide more of those things. If the students aren't utilizing something, then we want to try and replace it with things that they actually want to utilize. So again, it goes back to using their data, using what they're using, and then adding more of those things that the students actually enjoy. And then, last thing. And then I have a kind of a list of things I put together. This is something that you guys have inside your packet. These are just things we want to utilize in the room. So we want to remove the conference table, remove the whiteboard and cork boards, and then bring in furniture, repurpose some lounge furniture that we have in our building, and kind of make the room more of a lounge feel.
And I think this leads us into our next one.
So you're probably gonna have to escape. Up at the top. Yep.
Hi, everyone. My name's Katie White, and I am a counselor at South Lyon East High School. And so I want to introduce you to two special guests that I have invited here tonight, and I am so thankful that they have come. Mrs. Karen Story, and then Dr. Greg Gray, Superintendent of Brighton Schools. They also have brought Duncan with them. So I'm going to go through our PowerPoint. I'm going to move a little quicker than I had planned, just because I know we have a time constraint, and I really want to open up some discussion for you all to speak with the folks from Brighton who do this every day. Okay, there's just a picture of their stadium with their dogs. Okay, so as part of my Genius Hour project, I've been doing a lot of research, and I first got introduced to Karen through a friend of mine who actually works in the Brighton School District, and I had heard a lot of buzz about what's been going on in Brighton and all the wonderful things that are coming with the Therapy Dog program. So in my research, I've gone through and found some interesting things, but there's a lot of common threads that come through in all the research. So I tried to be really concise. Therapy dogs help reduce student stress and anxiety, and they also improve school attendance. They provide social and emotional support for students that really are in need of it. More and more students are being diagnosed with depression and anxiety, as you heard from Michelle Lindsay and Jeremy Noka. I am a counselor, and my counterparts, my gen ed social worker colleague, and the other counselor, Mara Elward, is here. We can say that we see depression and anxiety all the time. So we're just looking for ways to help our students be supported while they're at East and make it a place that they feel safe. The social benefits of therapy dogs: they can teach empathy and appropriate interpersonal skills. They help students develop social skills. They improve students' abilities to pick up on social cues that are imperative to our human relationships. And something I thought was really cool is there's over 50,000 therapy dogs being used right now in the United States, not specific to school, but in a lot of different industry. The physical benefits of therapy dogs, a lot of common themes emerged. They're going to lower blood pressure, improve your cardiovascular health, helping with anxiety, slowing down breathing, and in some people, they actually can reduce the amounts of medications that they take. I thought that was pretty interesting. And then they just diminish overall physical pain, is what a lot of the research said. So, goals for Therapy Dog at East. This is kind of our vision. We obviously will be the first school in the district to do it. We would like the dog to reside with us during the school day in our counseling office. That's where we see a lot of the crisis come up. But of course, if someone else needs it in the building, we're happy to share. But our goal is to have it stay primarily in student services with the social workers and the counselors. We're going to be utilizing the dogs to provide a stress. We're going to be utilizing the dog to promote an environment where stress levels can be decreased and anxiety levels can be decreased. And as I've said about the amount of depression and anxiety that we see, as you heard from the presenters before me, we're just really looking for ways to help support our students at East. After many school districts have visited with Brighton, you can see all of the different school districts that Brighton has helped partner with. They are the leaders in this area for therapy dogs. I'll let them speak in just a second. But they have been doing this for 10 years, and they are amazing, and I'm basically doing everything that they have done because, you know, why invent the wheel, right? All right, and so what I want to do is I'd like to just invite Mrs. Story, if you could kind of talk a little bit about the risks and responses that you have seen, because I'm sure these come up a lot. I have allergies, biting and scratching.
Yeah, so thanks for having us. We've been working on this project together for 10 years. And so as far as the allergies go, that was the first concern that, we kind of talked about, is how are we going to handle allergies, right, with the kids? So we came up with a system where, so for example, Duncan is at Mulvey Intermediate School, where there'll be a picture on the outside of the classroom that may just say like Duncan Free Classroom. So staff knows, kind of like a peanut allergy, right? We have peanut allergy tables at the school, so kids know. The dog doesn't go in that classroom, staff knows, okay, we have a kid that's allergic and the parents have asked, they didn't want any contact with the dog. If the kid is in the media center, same thing. So, we really haven't had an issue with it. We've had to do it once, I think, in 10 years. So I think for parents, they see the benefit, and most kids, if they're allergic, they just don't go and, pet Duncan. They just kind of avoid and they just keep going. So that's, how we handle the allergies.
So Karen called me, I think the first month I was on the job, this is my 11th year in Brighton, the superintendent, said we need to do a therapy dog, and so my mind jumped right to risk, obviously. I sat on insurance boards, and, obviously we have insurance in the district, so we worked through SETSEG, who I believe you're with, and we're now we had 13 dogs, we retired one last year as that dog had aged out. But it falls under our normal policy. One recommendation we would have is the dogs are owned by the district. And the process of training is really important. Who you pick to house the dog is very important. We have a rigorous screening process for that. We pick who gets the dog at the end of that. Usually it's always been a staff member in terms of that. And we look at longevity of the staff member and so on and so on. And so it's a pretty rigorous screening process as well to who actually is the handler of the dog during the day. But, I've been a superintendent now 15 years. I would say probably one of the most impactful programs I've seen in terms of especially the social emotional health with the dogs. But we've probably worked through all of the questions that I would assume as a board, and I've known George forever as a superintendent, that are kind of running through his head right now in terms of risk and what if it does this and what if it does that. And we're willing to give you all this stuff. We've done this with lots of other schools from our screening process and that. I've just really seen a difference. We unfortunately had a student pass today, and we had 6 dogs at the school where the student had passed today to help the kids. And if you've never seen the dog in action, or a dog like this in action, you'll be a believer immediately, absolutely immediately. And I don't know what it is, but they can sense it. And just like in the hallway, it's so interesting now that I walk around with these dogs. You walk in, the people can't help but smile, better mood, pet the dog. In a classroom, though, it takes on a whole different role in terms of supporting the kids. It'll go to a kid that's in crisis. It'll seek them out. It's crazy how it works. But I've seen it time and time again, and it's just been a really good program for us. So people donate the money. It's usually about $8,000 to $9,000 for a dog with all the training. We do the vests and we advertise. We require these dogs to be at events. They got to be at every Friday night football game. They have to be at all of our big parades, all of our big other contests, because they're part of the staff. And you'll see a big difference in the dogs from when they're working in the class, and then we take them out, and then they're a puppy again. So the training is really, really the key. We've had some situations where we've talked and said, dogs reverted a little bit over the summer, so we retrain, and we really do the program with chicken feathers, I would say, and go very, very slow and methodical. I think that's what we've had a lot of the success that we've had.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming down tonight.
Sure.
If you would take a couple of questions, I'm
Yeah.
sure we have some.
And the insurance one I talked about earlier falls under the normal insurance policy. You don't pay extra for it because they're owned by the school system. It would just be like a car or a work truck or another employee of the district.
I'll start. How do you keep the kids from feeding treats to the dog? If it's like mine, they live for treats, right?
Yeah, we train all of our kids. So we train, starting with kids from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade, right? So we have a PowerPoint presentation, you know, when the kids come in right away, first day of school, like, hey, you've got, you know, your school dog here. Your school dog is not your pet like you have at home. It's not gonna jump on furniture. It's not gonna jump on people. But the kids are really good at taking the ownership and the responsibility. And we tell the kids, if Duncan eats human food, he is going to get sick. And the kids, you know, for them, it's like, oh, I don't want the dog to get sick, you know. So the kids are really good about picking up the food. And I will tell you, I could have a porterhouse steak right in front of Duncan. If I tell Duncan to leave it, he's gonna leave it. So you know, that's
amazing.
part of the training. When you tell that dog to leave it, they're gonna leave it. Now, you know, a kid might say leave it, he's not gonna listen to him. He's gonna listen to who he knows is the voice, and that's just part of the training. But, yeah, food is not an issue.
And in every building, we have a handler and then backups. So the handler could get ill, the handler could break their ankle, who knows? And so there's several people that are trained in each building for each dog.
What does a normal day look like for the dog? Are they just kind of wandering around the school, or are they in the house?
Very regimented, yeah.
They need a hall pass.
So,
You know, it depends on the school. So we really have looked at, you know, what kids do we have in the school? What's gonna work best for the kids in the school? So, for example, at the high school, we have 3 dogs. We have, what, 2,200 kids? Yep. So we have 1 dog in our counseling office, right? Just for kids that are visiting the counseling office, whatever their needs are, they've got their dog keeper there.
And it's in the Zen Den. We did one of those, so I would highly recommend it. We've had it a couple years. It's phenomenal, and that's where one of the dogs is.
And then the other dog is in our special education program, working with our kiddos maybe with autism, working on jobs with kids. And then we have another dog that is just kind of building wide. So that might be, you know, Mr. Wendrick might get a call and say, hey, you know what, we had a kid that mom is in the hospital, you know, let's send the dog there. And then like for an elementary, one of our elementaries, it works out really well for the dog to be in the media center, right? Like having kids excited about reading. So every kid throughout the week visits the media center, they get to have the interaction with the dog. Multi, for example, we have.
5-6 building.
Yep, our 5-6 building. We have about 900 kids, roughly, and he follows a schedule, kind of like a teacher. Teachers will sign out, like he would have a Monday, Wednesday schedule and a Tuesday, Thursday. So for 45 minutes, he might be with Dr. Gray, who's teaching and has been trained. And then 45 minutes later, he will come to my room. We always make sure that our dogs have a lunch and a prep. So they have about an hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes off. And
They
that-
bargain that hard.
Yeah.
How do you say no? You can have it.
And he will,
retirement
honestly,
package.
he will be away from kids, away from staff. That is time for him to just rest. And, you know, because I will tell you,
They work.
1 o'clock, he's tired, like we all are, right? So he's tired and he gets his time. So we're really careful about that. That is midday and, you know, the kids understand that. So yeah, does that answer that? You know?
Anybody else?
I was just curious, I noticed in your photos, it looked like there were maybe a couple of different breeds in here. Is there some option in there like, within like a limited range, and how does that, is there a certain type that tends to work out better than others, or?
As far as the breed?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yep, we have all labs, except for we have 1 Aussie Shepherd, who is at our top spot in our senior center, so our preschool program, and with our seniors. And then we have a Bernie Doodle, and she is at our alternative high school. But the rest are all labs, and they're,
The breeder that I have selected through Brighton Schools, it's going to be a lab. And we've selected a breeder that they've recommended for this pilot program.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was, I didn't know if there was any rationale to the particular choice, you know, if there was something, just a favorite of a particular.
Stick to a certain, certain area of breeds. We've found a lot of luck with labs. We've tried the 2 new ones, and we've tried them in different locations just to see. We thought, well, what kind of dog would fit better in our preschool, which is our daycare, all the way through senior citizen center. And so we tried a different dog there. Littler, for the littler kids. And then our alternative high school dog is a little bit bigger, more sturdy breed, and just a little different. So
Makes sense.
Yeah, we really have found our labs, I mean, we're lab lovers, but we have found like they are just perfect for, you know, the temperament, allowing kids to climb over them. Where our Aussie Shepherd is super, you know, I mean, has to have a job to do, and it is with those babies, like he'll sit there at the gate, where we may not put the Aussie in a 5-6 building where, yeah, I'm not gonna be as lazy. So our labs are just, you know, they're wonderful. They're all wonderful, but yeah.
You know, the other question I would have if I were you, a therapy dog's different than a service dog. We have some service dogs in the district too. And so we spend a great deal of time with interaction between our therapy dogs and our service dogs. We bring trainers in, and because that relationship has to happen too, because a kid or a staff member may require a service dog too. I think we have 3 in the district presently in buildings that have therapy dogs as well. That was a little wrinkle to it, you know, that we've worked our way through in terms of how to introduce, how to train, what rooms they're in, the communication. So that was another piece that we didn't anticipate out of the gate.
And another issue that has come up is fear. We have had 2 situations. We had one situation right away where a child was bit by a dog at a young age at home. And when the child was coming to Mulvey in 5th grade, the parents were like, oh my gosh, like, you guys have a dog, our child is deathly afraid of the dog. So we really used it as a proactive situation, and we worked with the parents and said, listen, like, this dog is the safest dog your child's gonna come across. We have a counselor that's gonna work with your child. We have a teacher. We're gonna work through this process together. You know, it's that one-on-one, working with that kid, and we would just slowly introduce that kid to the dog on the kid's terms, right? So we would be way at the end of the other end of the hall, and the dog would be way on the other end, and we would just walk the dog, you know, okay. And then a couple months later, slowly integrate them. Now, did this kid by the end of the year, like, climb all over the dog? No. But he was willing and okay just to at least pet the dog and move on. So we felt like that was success for our kid. We worked through the anxiety, we worked with the counselors, we worked with administration. So for the kid, it was like, okay, that was great. And then we had one this summer. We had a family move in, and they, you know.
They were dog breeders, but,
Yeah,
or
dog-
trainers,
yeah. And they
but
just-
didn't want part of the program, so.
Yeah,
we-
so-
We worked through it just like we'd work through a 504 or an IP or
Yeah.
whatever. and
So I'm assuming with the dog, you have one main handler, and the dog that's where the dog lives in the weekends, evenings, and summer?
Same thing.
Yep, the goal is for the dog to stay with the host family.
Okay.
And in the end, the host family adopts the dog when it's time for retirement.
Is that host family a teacher, or could it be anyone in the district? And
Anybody
they
can
just
apply.
So they just make sure the dog's there first thing in the morning, and then picks the dog up at the end of the day, and,
We try to keep it in building. So,
Yes.
so for example, you know, if we have a dog being placed at the high school,
High school staff member is gonna get that dog.
okay.
yes.
So for our pilot, I've invited the person that is volunteering to host the dog, just if it gets approved. This is Christy Phelan Everhart, she's our gen ed social worker. So she would be the one, and she also will be in our counseling office, because that's where we are, and that's where we plan to have the dog primarily, so.
Now, what happens if the host teacher is, sick that day or out for a couple days? Does the dog just stay home that day, or does someone go get the dog and bring the dog in? Okay,
That would be me.
Like
Okay.
you said earlier, we have backups.
okay,
We have backups. Yep.
We have
And
a
then
secondary handler in every building.
okay.
we introduce them too. So, like, if I'm the handler at Maltby, my room has Duncan's space, the bed or whatever, and then the secondary handler, there's a space.
Okay.
So the dog isn't thrown off, just because Karen's sick and I gotta fill in that day or vice versa.
So I'm a secondary handler at Mulvey, so Duncan is spending the night with me, so he knows me. But the one thing that is nice about the training is that we don't ever force the dog upon a staff member, right? Like, if a staff member doesn't want to have the dog in the classroom, we understand, we get that. So the kids might see the dog in phys ed or in the media center, those other places. So we open up to the staff, hey, if you want to be trained and have Duncan in the classroom at any point in time, you have to go through this training. And so the teachers on their prep hours, or even after school or before school, will do a training for everybody that is interested. So that's nice, you know, teachers have that option, or staff members, you know, I'd like to have a dog or I don't. And, you know, for the most part, you know, we have 90% of staff, we might have some staff that are allergic, but yeah, and the staff knows that at any point in time, our administration may come and get the dog for a crisis, or our counselors or our social workers, and the kids know that they don't, you know, get upset like, oh, Duncan's leaving. The kids know, somebody needs Duncan, and, you know, they get it. You know, we've honestly have had some really unique situations in buildings where we had a kid that he was a runner, right? And we're like, oh, you know, leave the building. So we would take Duncan, and the minute we would say Duncan's name or Shadow's name, that kid's like, you know, and is willing to turn back to, you know, be comforted by Duncan. So there's, you know, situations where they just, that moment of like, oh my gosh, like you saved the day, Duncan.
Do you have data, there was a lot of stats in the presentation about anxiety and suicidal depression, stuff like that. Do you have stats for your school?
We do very similar surveys that you do. It's called MyFi, I think, in our community. They do a community-wide one.
And have you seen an improvement in those stats as a result of this?
Quite a bit. Now, I don't know, we have lots of programs, so I don't know if I would pin it just on the dog. There's a number of different activities we do for social emotional that's a big piece of all schools right now. But I can tell you, as we see the numbers, if we see the numbers decrease, I would give some credit for sure. And I would give the unseen consequences that you'd see. A kid that, like Karen said earlier, maybe had a rough night at home, walk through, they see the dog, they make it through the day. Whereas before, they might have not made it through the day. Or, you know, a kid that is struggling with a relationship with a friend, see the dog, that can turn that day as well. I think there's a lot of those moments during the day that we couldn't chart that are probably equally as important as the things that we could.
Could I just also add to the community outreach, just in her research, I know you have to move on to your next part of your meeting, but she already has people willing to sponsor,
I have a
should this
vet.
get approved at some point.
I have a
but-
vet that's giving, like, has already volunteered to give the dog the healthcare and routine service. So I've been doing a lot of legwork. I have a lot of pieces. I'm just waiting to see if it gets approved, and then I'll be working a little bit more feverishly to secure everything. But you have how many dogs in your district? And
12.
It's cost nothing because the community has.
So that's what we're
Yeah.
looking, it's a connection to the community, no cost. I mean, it's just the fact that these people have already reached out and volunteered to help, it really speaks to
Well, and vendors come out of the
thinking
woodwork.
outside of the box.
You know, there's a reason it's named Duncan Chiropractic. Ford, another one's named Chevy. Depending on what they donate, there's naming rights. So it's pretty easy to get to how many dogs you need, you know.
And that is really the unique piece, and I love that, you know, that they are wanting to do that piece. It really is taking the community, you know, us at school, the parents, all of us working together. It really has come full circle, and the community is just as invested in these dogs as we are. And, you know, I can't tell you enough that, like, these dogs.
You have to
are
see it.
lifesavers.
I would invite you, if you're hesitant at all, give us a call and come over, and we'll let you watch the dog in action, and you'll support it immediately, I guarantee it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much this evening for coming down, and thanks Doug, couldn't give him a treat on the way home. I'm anticipating, Mrs. Fisher, that you're gonna bring forth some type of formal proposal, and, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lincoln knows it's time to go home.
It's been a long day.
I would like
He's
to
on
send
overtime.
my dog to their trainers for just a little bit.
Oh, didn't get through my whole presentation,
in
but
already.
if you don't have it, well, yeah,
Yeah, we gotta move on.
got it, for sure.
I like it. Let's get a dog.
Bunch of dogs.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's like the shifting of the guard out there.
Want to go to Brighton? Want to go to Brighton?
Donna will be upset. Donna will be upset.
Okay, we're gonna call the regular and organizational meeting to order at 7:10 this evening. We're running a touch behind, but well worth it. If you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Schwegler?
Here.
Ms. Ertel?
Here.
Mr. Abate?
Here.
Mr. Dashner?
Here.
I am here. Mr. Kennedy?
Here.
And Mr. Clark.
Here, we have a quorum, all 7 are present, and as are all the staff members. If you'll please join me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to welcome Dr. Heitch to the board table this evening for his first board meeting. It's nice to have you here. And this is our organizational meeting where we elect new officers for the year. I had previously indicated to the board I was not seeking a officer position this year. So to that end, I'll entertain a nomination for the office of president.
I'd like to nominate Mrs. Henshaw, and I'd like to add to that Mr. Clark. I appreciate the work that you've done over the last couple of years. You put an awful lot in.
Thank you, Mr. Bate. Do I have a second?
Support.
Thank you, Mr. Dashner. All right, we need a roll call vote, please.
Okay, Mr. Schwegler?
Yes.
Ms. Ertel?
Yes.
Mr. Abate?
Yes.
Mr. Dashner?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
And Mr. Clark.
Yes. And we have a 7-0 for the office of president to Mrs. Hanshaw. And with that, I'll relinquish the gavel.
Thank you.
It's not as big as the one in the House of Representatives, but
All right. With
Great.
that, we now need to elect a vice president. I would like to ask Mr. Kennedy, would you call the roll for the next 2 elections until we have a new secretary,
Sure.
please? Okay. With that, do I have a nomination for vice president?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Kennedy to continue in the role, if you'd like to do that, Mr. Kennedy.
I'll accept.
Support.
Get to call the roll for myself, don't
Yes.
I? So, Mr. Schwegler?
Yes.
Mr. Ertel?
Yes.
Mr. Abate?
Yes.
Mr. Dashner?
Yes.
Ms. Hanshaw?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mr. Clark?
yes.
Motion carries. Nomination carries, technically.
All right. Yes, so with that, congratulations, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you.
Next, we need a nomination for secretary, and I would like to nominate Mr. Abate. Can I get a second?
Support.
And please call the roll.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Hanshaw?
Yes.
Mr. Dashner?
Yes.
Mr. Abate?
Yes.
Mr. Ertel?
Yes.
And Mr. Schwegler?
Yes.
Motion, nomination, election carries.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And lastly, we need a nomination for treasurer.
I would nominate Mr. Dashner to continue in that role.
I'll support that. And can I get a roll call?
Me now?
Oh, yeah, no, yes, it's Mr. Abate now.
All right. Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanshaw?
Yes.
Mr. Dashner?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mrs. Ertel?
Yes.
And Mr. Schwegler? Yes.
All right, yeah, motion passes 7-0. Congratulations. All right, item 4, check signatures. We have the payroll checks, which would be the Assistant Superintendent for Business and Finance. The accounts payable would be the Assistant Superintendent for Business and Finance, and the bond expenditures would be the Assistant Superintendent for Business and Finance.
I'll move that we,
Questions?
sorry. I was going to say, I'll move
Yeah.
to approve that the Business and Finance Assistant Superintendent continue in the role of the check signatures for the next year.
Okay,
Support that.
all right, any questions or comments on that? Okay, call the roll.
Mr. Schwegler?
Yes.
Ms. Ertel?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Dashner?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanshaw?
Yes?
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
And Mr. Clark?
Yes.
All right, and the last thing, for committee assignments, we have, for the Educational Foundation, we have Mr. Abate. For the Oakland Schools Legislative Committee, we have Mr. Clark with Ms. Ertel as a backup. For the Oakland Schools Designate, I have Mr. Clark again. For Policy, we have Mr. Abate, Mr. Clark, and Ms. Hanshaw. For Finance, we have Mr. Dashner, Mr. Clark, and Mr. Swigler. For Curriculum and Communications, we have Mr. Kennedy, Ms. Ertel, and Mr. Schwegler. And for Facilities, we have Mr. Kennedy, Ms. Ertel, and Mr. Dashner. All right. Any other questions or comment? Mr. Hodge? No?
You ready for me?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. So this is School Board Recognition Month, and this will be one of the first moments you have to miss Melissa, because I understand she was quite crafty. And you would usually get something that had a little bit of bling or something with it for School Board Recognition
Extremely
Month.
generous.
Extremely generous of her. So, in honor of that, Southline is joining 529 local and 56 intermediate school districts across Michigan to celebrate January as School Board Recognition Month. Our school board members spend countless hours working to provide the best possible education for our students, and they also serve as the corporate board of directors for one of our community's largest employers. Celebrating School Board Recognition Month is one way to say thanks for all that you do. School board members represent your fellow citizens' views and priorities in the complex enterprise of maintaining and running the community's public schools. They also reinforce the principle of local control over public education, which is an important, highly valued aspect of education in Michigan. And too often, the efforts of local school board members go unrecognized. The school board's main goal is to support student achievement, and to achieve that goal, the board focuses on creating a vision for what parents and citizens want their school district to become and how to make student achievement the top priority. They set standards for what students must learn and be able to do. They assess whether schools achieve their goals and whether students are learning. They're held accountable for the outcomes of decisions and track progress and report results. They align the use of the district's human and financial resources. They create a safe and orderly climate where students can learn and teachers can teach. They collaborate to solve common problems and to support common successes. And they focus on continuous improvement by questioning, examining, revising, refining, and revisiting issues related to student achievement. Even though we're making a special effort during January to show appreciation for our school board members, we recognize their contributions reflect a year-round effort on our part. They're dedicated individuals who are committed to improving student achievement and to fighting for the best for all of our students. Thank you for all that you do. And you'll notice there's a little something in front of you, not quite as generous, I'm sure, as Melissa might have been.
Thank you.
But thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you.
With that, item 6 is public comment. I don't have any yellow cards, but if anyone would like to speak, now would be the time. All right. Item 7, approval of agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved?
Support.
Any questions, comments, changes? No? Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Approval of minutes. Hear a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the December 2nd regular meeting, December 9th special meeting, 2 December 9th special meetings, in fact, 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock, December 16th special meeting, and January 13th special meeting.
I'll second.
Questions, comments, updates? I just had one, Judy, on the December 2nd regular meeting. In my comments, not sure why I thanked Deputy Dorkins for coming to the swim meet. It was actually I thanked Deputy Biggers, it was Deputy Dorkins. So if you could correct that. That's it. With that, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Item 9, approval of bills. The motion?
I move to approve the November 2019 prepaids, December 2019 prepaids, the January 2020 AP bill run, January 2020 bond bills, November 2019 wires and ACH transactions, December 2019 wires and ACH transactions, and then the November 2019 revenue report and the December 2019 revenue report.
I'll second the motion.
Questions or comments? Okay, can I get a roll call vote on that?
Sure, Mr. Dashner.
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Sertel.
Yes.
Mr. Schwegler.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
And Ms. Sandshaw.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item number 10, Teacher recommendation for hire, Mr. Kirby?
All right, thank you. I have the privilege of bringing forth 3 new hires to our team. We have 2 vacancies due to resignation and 1 position which has been vacant since the start of the school year. 2 of them were able to be here with us tonight. The first is Ashley Gomez. She's a social worker at both Sayre and Brummer. She received her Master's of Social Work at Wayne State and her Bachelor's at Eastern Michigan. She's worked at Keystone Academy as a social worker, Henry Ford Health Systems as a medical social worker, Wayne State University as a lead student research assistant, and at Access for maternal infant health program social worker. So she has quite a few experiences under her belt, and she notably was a substitute teacher back from 2009 through 2013. So she has familiarity with students as well. So this is Ashley Gomez. Thank you, Ashley.
Welcome.
Next, I have Renee Lazat. She's a Brummer 4th grade teacher, and she is coming to us from Michigan State University. She has her master's in teaching and curriculum and a bachelor's of art. She taught at Dearborn Public Schools since 2017. She also worked at the Hope of Detroit Academy, and where she taught 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and she did that for 5 years. Okay, and lastly, Emily Parker. Emily is going to be a 4th grade teacher, not able to be here tonight. 4th grade teacher at Hardy. She's new to the profession. She graduated from Oakland University. She did her student teaching at Lake Orion at Walden Middle School. She also was a resident assistant at Oakland University in the housing department, and she worked at the Best Brains Learning Center as the center administrator. I would recommend that you approve the hiring of these 3 educators effective on their respective start dates that were listed above.
Motion?
I'll move to hire the 2 teachers and social worker.
I will support that.
Questions or comments? Welcome.
Welcome aboard.
With that, please call the roll, Mr. Bakker?
Ms. Hanshaw.
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Schwegler.
Yes.
Mr. Tell.
Yes.
I vote yes, and Mr. Dashner.
Yes.
Right, motion passes 7-0. Welcome to the district. Thanks for coming tonight.
Wait, you don't want them to stay through the riveting bond presentation and the budget amendment?
So it's always awkward for them to leave, so I just kind of put it out there.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
Thank you.
All right, item 11, acceptance of gifts.
All right, acceptance of gifts. As you can see, this is not an episode of Hoarders, but we do have a lot of gifts. As you can see, I'll go through and highlight some of them, but Brummer Elementary received $500 for math and science work. They also received $400 for 2 HP Chromebooks for the ELA math workshop stations. Brummer Elementary also received 2 more Chromebooks along with 7 mice to go with those computers, not as pets, for an individual classroom. Dolson Elementary received 72 3rd grade student dictionaries from the Kiwanis Club. Dolson also received some flexible seating from an anonymous donor, as well as some nonfiction books. Hardy received 750 custom lanyards for their Husky dens. And as you can see, the South Lyon East High School robotics team is fast at it, and they will actually be here as a program in February. And you guys can talk with them about the work that they're doing and whatnot. But you can see there's a variety of donations stemming from $50 to $2,500. If you total all that up, you're at just shy of $28,000 in donations that they have received. And the large amount basically is, from the time that we had our last board meeting, and this is an important time for them for raising donations, but the work that they've done obviously is exceptional. So I would recommend that you accept the gifts in accordance with policy 9350.
I'll move to accept the gifts.
Support.
Questions or comments?
Thank you to the
Thank you, that's a-
generosity of the community and
Yeah,
all the donors.
yeah. And the Kiwanis have been donating these dictionaries for how many years, do we know? Years and years.
Decades.
Yeah,
It's quite
so,
some time, yeah.
Yeah, thank you to them for continuing that. So with that, I'll do a voice vote. All in favor of approving that? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Item 12, budget amendment number 1. Mrs. Witt?
This agenda item was presented at the December 2nd board meeting. The amendment was reviewed with the Finance Committee and no changes were requested. This amendment is within the board policy of 6220 parameters of 10% plus or minus 1 for the 2019-20 school year. I would recommend to approve the 2019-20 budget amendment number 1 as presented.
Any motion?
I'll move to, so moved.
I'll support
quicker that way.
budget amendment number 1.
Thank you, Ms. Motion by Mr. Dashner, supported by Mr. Clark. Questions or comment?
Digging
Okay.
our way out, good thing. We're digging our way out, it's a good thing.
Yes, yeah, very good. Mr.
I
Wilkie?
roll?
Yep.
I vote yes. Mrs. Ertel?
Yes.
Mr. Schwegler?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanshaw?
Yes.
And Mr. Dashner?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 13, administration, 2020
Thank you very
bond.
much. Thank you. The first item that we have under administration tonight is a review of the 2020 bond focus panel feedback that we received, if you recall, in mid-December. Bonnet and Bonnet came out and they hosted, with our help, some focus panels from a broad range of community and citizens. We want you to hear some of that feedback tonight. We want you to be able to have a conversation around that, because our expectation is we're coming back to you in 2 weeks to ask for a yes on the bond issue. We want to make sure you've asked every question you possibly can. So Cynthia, are you going to start and introduce everybody? Is Jeff going to start?
Yep, thank you very much.
Okay.
If you can give me a second to make sure this boots up.
That's different than the one.
Thank you, sir.
We have a cast of thousands for you tonight to present these slides.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chuck.
Hey, sir. Good.
Pipe along the way over.
You know, I like this. Thank you. The screen right in front of us. Oh, did it?
People don't necessarily know that we have them.
Yeah, I thought
Still
about that.
nice.
They think we're just staring at the.
Yeah, we have screens up here so we can see the
We're
presentation.
not zoning
in front of us.
out. We're not zoning out. It's,
Dirty laundry here, so.
No, it's nice though, because you're not always twisting around.
No, people don't necessarily know we have the TVs there.
So, start from the beginning. So thank you very much for letting us present to you, give you an update on what it is. In addition to myself here, we've got Chuck Lewis and Charlie from IDS, and then Kelsey and Cynthia from Bonnet and Bonnet Cassidy. So we're all gonna kind of go through their presentation. So what we wanted to talk to you about today, again, was the recap on what they saw during those focus groups. I thought those were excellent focus groups. There's a lot of good information out of there. If you had a chance, hopefully, to at least read through or part through that recap, there was a lot of good questions. That's really what we want out of those focus groups, is to get that information, draw it out, to know what might be out there. We've spent a lot of time, we've spent almost a year working on this right now, but we always want to kind of reach out and hear what other people have to say. Then after they're done, we'll work on a little bit of a couple of questions that we heard that we thought were very relevant, that we want to give you a little more information about. Then we'll turn it over to Stacy to talk a little bit more about the funding and what the actual ballot language will look like. And then we'll wrap it up with the next steps of what the schedule looks like, a couple of the next milestones we need to hit in this process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia and Kelsey.
Well, good evening. Thank you for letting us come to your meeting tonight. I'm Cynthia Bonnick, and I'm president of Bonnick and Cassidy, and with me is my colleague, Kelsey Burkmeyer. We are the two individuals who actually conducted all of your focus group sessions, so we wanted to make sure we were both here because we each handled different groups, and we want to make sure that in case you had any questions about any of the process or anything, that we'd both be here. You were given a report that looks something like this, and hopefully you've had a chance to review it. We could spend hours going through this, and we're not going to do that to you. So what we tried to do is just narrow it down just to a few general topics that we thought might be of interest to you, and then answering you, come up with some of we're going to provide you some of the questions that were asked, and then we can answer any question that you may have as to what we found out. So I'm going to turn it over first to Kelsey, and then I will take the next stage.
All right, thank you. So
again, Cynthia and Kelsey, myself, where we started. How did this come together? The overview of the focus panel process, that's what I'm going to walk you through. So we met with Melissa Baker and Jeff Atkins and talked behind the scenes first to develop projects that needed to be addressed in the facility, talking long-term and short-term projects, and how we were going to formulate them all, organize them, and then bring them to a focus panel and get community feedback. We wanted a good representation of your community. So I'm actually going to find my slides here. That'll help you, right? There we go. Let's talk about that. So we had a letter of invitation sent out to specific targeted groups in your community. We're looking at 2 groups of long-term residents, a group of elected officials and community leaders, high school students, elementary parents. We hosted 2 groups. Secondary parents, we hosted 2 groups, teachers, and then support staff as well. We wanted their honest, candid feedback related to the questions that we designed with them. We want to get their opinion on ballot language and refining those projects that we wanted to bring to you with the bond proposal. So we gave them, to start off the focus panels, Melissa gave a background information of Southline Community Schools. Jeff then came through and explained these are the projected projects that we would look at addressing, again, short-term and long-term, more critical needs and short-term needs. The big areas of, the areas that we are looking to address are student safety, academic programming, including the arts, and then athletic facilities as well. So after they heard the background information, we took them into their selected groups and ran them through an agenda. It's a series of questions that you were provided in that packet. It was, what do you like? What don't you like? What were you surprised by? Any concerns that you have based on the projects that are listed? And they gave us their honest feedback about it. And then another thing that we want to point out is they gave recommendations at the end of any question that you have or concern to the district. They also shared that information with us as well. Cindy's going to run through some of the questions or concerns that they had after. But what we want to share with you is how to use these findings. It's to be one decision-making tool for you in a magnitude of decision-making tools when it comes to placing a bond. So use the information, use us for questions. Jeff is going to run through more of the construction and the design process questions that they had. We'll run through the marketing questions that they had. So I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia to answer some of those questions.
Okay, first I wanted to let you know that your community members that participated in this process were very open. Okay? They were willing to talk. They shared all their ideas. They weren't afraid of criticism from other members of the committees. They were great to work with. They really were. We had a good time with them. In fact, many of the people stayed after the session because they wanted to add more information. So that's always a positive sign. Cutting to the chase, the bottom line is that most of the people that were in the focus groups were supportive of the bond proposal put forward as we explained it at that time. Okay, they also thought that if there was going to be something else on the ballot that might change things, if there's other money requests or anything, but they were very pleased with everything that was done, the thoroughness of the presentation that answered all of their questions. They shared information for us in 2 areas. As Kelsey said, our part that we're going to share with you is just the marketing and information pieces, and then the design pieces we're going to turn back over to Jeff. We always start our focus groups with an easy question, okay? Something to get people talking. So one of the questions we always ask is, all things considered, what grade would you give the Southline Community Schools for the education it provides to the community? We do that for 2 reasons, to get people talking, and then also just to get some general perceptions before we get into the actual meat of the agenda. And your community members assigned a 3.1 grade point average when we divide all the grades that they provided. That's a high grade point average. A lot of the places that we work are really in the low 2s. And so when yours came back so positive, we were very surprised, and we enjoyed that. That was really nice. It's just a reflection of your school district. As Kelsey said too, at the end of the survey, or at the end of our agenda, we always ask another question. If you could send one message or idea or comment to the board on any topic, not even what was discussed today, what would that be? The reason we ask that question is we want to see if there's any other hidden items out there that we didn't address, or if there are other issues or concerns as a board you may or may not be aware of, or the administration may or may not be aware of. So those items are listed, I think, on question 18 at the back of the report. And if you just like want to thumb through those at some point, just to see if anything else pops up that you were surprised by. But we use that information to help refine our information campaign. Information, questions, and concerns that were raised. The pool was a big item of discussion. Okay? And it wasn't so much that, why should we do a pool? It was, thank God we're doing the pool. Their major area of concern, however, was not that you were doing it, but what's the construction timeline and what's the process? How long are we going to be shut out of that pool? What other options do we have during that construction time frame? Can you speed that up? Are you going to have to meet the needs of all the users? The senior citizens want the pool warmer, and the swimmers want the pool colder, and they want for the handicapped students, they want certain things to be happening in the pool and certain things that, like walk-ins, and we spent a lot of time on the pool. Okay, everybody likes the pool. They did bring up the question, though, about overcrowding at the high school and middle school levels, and they were really concerned that students and parents felt that those two facilities were overcrowded or nearing to be overcrowded. And they wanted to know why those building projects, the proposed building projects, did not include any additions onto those facilities. And so Jeff's going to talk a little bit more about that later. And we talked about building capacity. So in our informational materials that we prepare for the community, we have to talk about how many students can each building hold, what's the current enrollment, what's the projected enrollment, and answer some of those questions in our FAQ, because those are on the minds of people out in the community. Another question was, and this is you're going to see on both of our slides, will CTE programs be available to students at both high schools? And the question came about in two different ways. One was, will the exact same CTE programs be available at each high school? And then another group of people said, if they're not available at each high school, will students have the ability to go to the different high schools to take part in the programs that they want? And we reassured them that the programs would be the same, or not exactly the same, but the students could participate in all programs. So they really want an explanation of what are the CTE programs at each school, because we got the impression that they really didn't know. They only knew what was at the school where their children would be attending or where students were currently attending. Synthetic turf. That came up, and people in all communities are getting more and more comfortable with synthetic turf, and I think that the South Lyon families are really pleased that you've already started that installation, and they see it as a safety measure for students. They also see it as a cost reduction for maintaining fields and additional use of the fields. So they're very supportive of that area. Then there was the term field house that was tossed about, and they felt that that was a little bit misleading, because they felt it's not really a field house right away. They thought, oh my gosh, they're building a U of M stadium field house. No, that's not what's taking place. It's just updating the lockers and the bathrooms, so we have to make sure that we're talking about what a field house really is. Everyday language, they were told, needs to be used to explain the bond proposal, and not talk in architect or design speak. That tell us, we don't know what a chiller is, okay? So just tell us what's happening. We don't know necessarily what an HVAC system is. So what air handlers are, what is that? Is that somebody doing this in a room? So we want to make sure that we use everyday language that people can understand. The absentee ballot was another piece that was a suggestion from the groups. They wanted to make sure that we really promote staff members and their families who live in the community to vote by absentee ballot, because now anybody can, for any reason. And we've noticed in our analysis since that proposal passed that it's gone up a little bit, but before, the major people who took part in absentee voting were 60 and older, because that's when you could actually vote for no reason. And now we saw that there are more people who are 58 and 59 voting. Okay, so we haven't hit the parent group yet. It hasn't sunk in yet that they can vote for any reason. So they really want to make sure that we get out to your parent group and let them know that's available to them. They also suggest, oh yeah.
Just a quick clarification. Yeah. So are you saying that the absentee ballot hasn't really increased the amount of voters from from what
It
you've seen so
hasn't
far?
increased the amount of voters, it's increased the amount of people who have voted by absentee, but instead of it being the majority of them 60 and older, they're now 58 and older.
Okay.
So the older, younger people, the younger, older people are now taking advantage of it, but our families still aren't taking advantage of it. And the sad thing is, in schools, 15 to 33% of eligible parent voters actually turn out to vote in school elections. Kelsey and I worked on 2 elections that both passed in Macomb County in May. The one school district had a 7% parent turnout, and the other one had a 3% turnout. Wow. Okay, I mean, that's appalling. South Lyon's better than that. You're going to do much, much better than that. And people who participated in the focus groups want to help make sure that the word is out there so people can get out and vote. In both of those elections that I just talked about, the number one group of people that voted were 60 and over. So a lot of people think that if you're over 60, you no longer support schools. And that's not the case, because in those 2 school districts, those are the people who actually voted yes. We're not sure how the parents, how they felt about the issue or why they didn't come out to vote. We're still doing an analysis on that, but that was eye-opening to us. Tapping into social media, that was another strong suggestion, that maybe we use social media to get parents out, and younger parents whose children, who have like 2 and 4-year-olds that aren't enrolled in school yet, and maybe that's a way that we can get them to the polls and talk about absentee voting. We do always include in our campaigns social media messaging, but we're going to do a little bit more focused for your group. A lot of people said it will pass if there aren't a lot of issues on the ballot, and then all groups said establish a citizens committee, somebody who can be the grassroots people who can go out and tell our story, because it's an important story to tell. You have a long line of success behind you, and people like that you have been very transparent on all of your bond issues in the past. And so they want to make sure that the citizens are involved, and citizens from all groups, from senior citizens to high school students. So, in a nutshell, that was your report. Those were some of the questions that came up. Do you have any questions for us?
Is there anything from the information you had coming from the administration side that you presented that you would suggest changing based off of the feedback you got out of the focus groups? I mean, I didn't see anything that was really resounding.
As far as eliminating projects or
Yeah.
anything? The major thing that came up, and I've already talked with Jeff about that, is people were wondering why you're adding on to 2 schools and not to the 2 schools where there seems to be the largest growth. And so in our informational materials, what we need to be able to do is explain that certain size buildings can serve only so many students, and then you're adding a second gym on, you're adding a second cafeteria. You know, some of the support systems. There's a real, I don't know what the word is, like a threat.
There's a sweet spot.
Yeah, there is a sweet spot for a building size and design. So we do need to explain to them why you're going to add on to the buildings that you are and not to the buildings that they feel are overcrowded. Okay. Kelsey, did you have anything else?
No, that was it.
That was it. That was really the biggest question that came out, was that. They wanted to know also if this was going to be a short-term or long-term fix to your problems. And we said that we were going to definitely deal with short-term, but also looking to long-term. And they seemed to think that the projects were in-depth enough that they felt comfortable with it. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised just how comfortable they were with everything. There was one other piece that was added, and I believe it was from the teachers group, where they wanted to know if you could air condition all the gyms. And that also came from the township, the township clerk's office. They also want to have separate
Voting areas.
entrances for those facilities who are polling places. But those are really the only 2 issues that were discussed in depth.
Your students were absolutely wonderful, too. They very, very open, very honest, but absolutely phenomenal group of students that came out and supported and participated in this, so.
There was another group that stayed beyond the time. Because they wanted to share. I don't know if it was, we thought they wanted to share. Maybe they just didn't want to go back to class. Any other questions for us?
Thank you.
Okay, the next round of questions that did come up were about specific building issues, and that's what Jeff is going to address. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for the frequently asked questions, the overall intent is we're going to take everything we can, all the questions that were asked, and actually publish them into a document. We'll put them into a Word document, put it into a PDF, put it on the website. That way, every question that's asked was answered out there. Because if one person asked that question, there may be a dozen people out there that had the same question. But we really kind of just, as we went through, we kind of cherry-picked what we thought was very, very poignant questions, things that maybe we over-explained during the presentation, but we're not going to have that same audience when people are looking at the ballot information. So we feel like we do want to do a little more information, sharing that out there. So a couple of the ones we cherry-picked that we thought were very relevant, and I'm not going to read all through all these right now, but these were a lot of the good questions that we thought. Some of the little minor things, are you going to fix the drainage at the baseball fields? Yes, we'll take care of that. That's part of the project. But these were ones we all thought were very relevant. We heard it more times than not. So I grabbed a couple of these I wanted to spend a little time on. This one kind of crosses the border between the election stuff, but I really wanted to address this because we hear this all the time right now, is why are you going for a May election? There's a couple of good reasons we go for a May election. One is that if we go for election in May, we have enough time for IDS to design projects the rest of the year. We can bid the projects out at the end of the year, which is the ideal time for bidding. Knowing that contractors are very, very short out there right now, we want to get out there and bid the work, and we can put work in place, substantial work in place in 2021. If we were to wait till November, that doesn't give us enough time to do any design work. We would be into 22 before we'd start work. So it's a full extra year of delaying getting that work in place. That's actually another year of escalation. And the size of product we're looking at, that is six figures of dollars that you'd be losing out on as far as operational for projects. So we're strongly recommending that, and just to let you know, there's about 40-some school districts that are working through Treasury right now to have bonds that are going to go in May. Plus, there are several other ones that aren't on the radar because they're non-qualified bonds. I'm guessing we're going to have 50-plus elections in May. So a lot of their school districts are in the same boat as you are. They see this as the right time to do it for multiple reasons that you're doing it. So, so they're all going for it. So you will be in good company with other school districts. So the pool, again, kind of emphasizing the same question. So what we are going to do for the pool is IDS is working on a standalone report that we'll be able to put onto the website because there's a lot of information about that pool. There's multiple reasons, really three key reasons we want to do that. One is the pool is just aging. It's in poor condition. It needs to have some work done there. But what we don't want to do is just go in there and do some work to fix it up as it is, because there's some shortcomings to that. That pool is much smaller than the one that's at East. So we really want to look at how can it be better used for the team sports that are in there. Right now, the 6 lanes meets the bare minimums, but doesn't meet today's standards of what we're building new. So there's an opportunity now, instead of putting money in there to just do repairs, there's an opportunity to make it right and right-size that pool. Also, we knew that pool is very highly used by the community and by the special needs students. So there's a unique program over there that's different than what's happening at East. So we want to make sure we address that also in this pool. So you're going to see a report, a standalone report. We don't have that finalized right now. We're working with the athletic director to make sure we have the right language as far as what's in there and not misspeak. But we just do a couple of diagrams on there. They've spent a lot of time. We've probably spent almost 50% of our time throughout this process just on this pool project. We want to make sure we get this right and plan for it properly. Another question I thought was unique was the 98 million. And this was something that just kind of caught me off guard is, why are we asking for that? Some people thought that, did we find out we could do $98 million of the work and we built a list to that max? And I just want to make sure that we clarify to people that no, that's not the case. There was a much larger list that came up. A lot of things on there were either thought of as they're more wish list type things, or they're things that we really don't need to do in the next 5, 6, 7 years. So why would we put them on the list right now? But you will have parking lots and roofs and mechanical equipment that will age out 10 years down the road, 12 years down the road. So this isn't a one-stop, this is going to take care of you for 20 years. But this is going to take care of you for the foreseeable future. And there are some things that we just looked at and we said, we've got life left on these things. We can look at those as part of a future program. We do know that growth will always be part of this community. That bubble may start working its way through up towards the secondary buildings, so that can be reevaluated into the future bond program. But right now, we're trying to address the growth needs at the elementary school with this program because that's where we're really stretched for capacity. Kind of transitioning nicely into that. So, yeah, the questions on why were the additions at Bartlett and Salem? So we did. We looked at this. We spent a lot of time. From the outside, people really have the perception that this community is growing so fast that we can't build buildings fast enough. But when we looked at the numbers and we waited until we had the 4th Friday count from this school year to really, before we advertised this or made our final decision on what to do, to see where that growth really was at. The elementary school level, we are at capacity. We do need some space to move Yeah, and it is true, the capacity is more at some of the other buildings, not at the smallest buildings, but we need to find a way to right-size things. We really, it would be tough to go in and tell students, because we made your building so big, you can't have art this week, you can't have, gym class this week, we can't put you all into the gymnasium. It would really be, as unfortunate it would be, those students would lose out on something because we've oversized that building for what they need. So what we want to do is we want to look at adding additions to the smaller buildings to bring them up to the same size, so that every building across the district will be at 24 classrooms, which is kind of a sweet spot for that. The middle school question, right now we did look at capacity, and you'd think that you do need a middle school added to there. The numbers just don't show that out. Right now, Millennium does have capacity to continue to grow into that. Centennial is pretty well nearing capacity, so we'll need to look at that. But we do have some money in here to add some furniture, because there was a couple mothballed classrooms at Millennium for a while. It's got some furniture in there right now, but it really needs some nicer furniture. So we will be doing some work to allow for more growth, so those classrooms are nice. We do have money at Millennium to upgrade the mechanical system, so we're really gonna make sure that all those classrooms are fully utilized at Millennium, so we don't have to build more at another middle school, which would be a huge operational expense at this point. At the high school, East continues to grow, where the other high school is pretty static at its capacity. So there's plenty of room at the high school. At East, though, we are nearing capacity. As part of this bond program, we are going to take a couple underutilized spaces and convert them to classrooms. That'll add about 4 classroom spaces, which will get them by for a time being. But at some point in the future, assuming nothing else does change, there will be a trend where we will need to have all these kids that are elementary right now will be at the high school level, so that will be something to address in the future. That building was master planned by somebody. For growth, there is a plan for adding a classroom additions out there, so it does have all the infrastructure in there that's necessary for it, because it was master planned, so we're not gonna be in the same boat we are with elementaries hitting a peak. So we can add just classrooms on there without having to upgrade the other parts of the infrastructure on that. So that'll be something for a future program discussion. CTE programs, just kind of reemphasizing that we will have that. Again, CTE programs, the thing we want to express is that those programs take up a lot of floor space, and they have a very expensive equipment. So to duplicate those programs in 2 different spots doesn't make a lot of sense. We also don't want to try to replicate what the Oakland Schools has at their tech center. That's a great program there. So we just want to kind of balance what those programs are. This is still going to be discussed. There's a lot of educational parts behind that. I'm not going to try to pretend what that space is. But we have budgeted money at both the buildings for both additional space, remodeling, and equipment. So we feel that based on what we heard from those 2 major CT instructors, that we can expand the program to let them grow into the space and do something more than what they have right now. CT is always going to be evolving. I mean, it's a great thing that we're here in Michigan right now to see that those trades are coming back, those people want to do things, the robotics, everything. So we just want to make sure we give them the space and the tools to be able to do that and continue to learn and stretch the limits of what they can do. Safety, security, I'm going to kind of stay a little high level on this just because of the sensitivity of it, but the questions did come up. There weren't a lot of questions, but what I just want to reemphasize is that the district has been doing things, continues to reevaluate things. I would say that they are at or above the standard I'd call for most school districts. Some of the things you have done already with some of the locks and the glazing are things that other school districts are just looking to do now, that are putting into their May bond issue that won't be implemented for years down the road. So you're ahead of the curve in some of those areas. And I do know that you have a specialized committee that continues to evaluate that. A lot of it winds up becoming procedural and just, training and retraining over the time. So that'll continue to happen, but we feel that right now, the safety and security-wise, short of a couple little fencing and little minor type things, that you really are in a good position right now. So those were the high-level ones I want. If there was other questions that you saw in here that were construction-related, I'm happy to answer that before I turn it over to Stacy for a little bit, or I can cover your stuff if you.
I can cover it if you want.
Okay.
Real quick, can you put on the CTE stuff, you mentioned some programs were only going to be available at one of the high schools and not
How's that going to work?
both, or?
Yeah,
Looks like she's ready to talk.
So we're working with the teachers that would be leading those programs, and we would be housing one set of programs at Southline High School and one at East. East already has a lot of our robotics equipment because of the team, so it makes sense to expand that space potentially, revamp it, and use that equipment rather than duplicate all the equipment at Southline High School to advance that program. And then at Southline High School, we would have other specialized programs. So students would travel, we would provide potentially transportation between the buildings. So you might be in the morning program at one school and then return back to your high school for the rest of your coursework. just like we do with the OTC buses. So that's our thought. It didn't make sense to duplicate the same programs in two places. We probably would not, at least to start, have enough student interest to do that in both spots. But we certainly could do two very quality programs in each of the, one in each location, and then have students travel between them.
And that's what most high schools, that have multiple high schools in their district do. The one that Charlie's working on with us, they've got 4 high schools. Each high school has its own specialized CTE program. Students can travel back and forth as they need to, but it really made those programs phenomenal because they were able to maximize all those spaces and turn it into something really special at that building. So they did one pilot, they're doing the other 3 high schools. I don't know where they're at, they're in process right now to do that same program. Stacy, I'm gonna let you, I'll be the button pusher.
Thank you. So we put together this graph to give you guys a visual of what our debt looks like at South Lyon for our bonded debt. And in the gray is our existing debt that we currently have. With this $98 million bond, we would not be asking the community to increase their property taxes for this. This would not increase taxes at all. You can see in the blue, this would be the new debt that we would take on with this May 2020 election if it were to pass. And as the old existing debt falls off, we just increase what we're paying on the new debt, and we're not tying ourselves in the future. So in the next 5 years, we'll actually have room to go out to the voters again and ask for an additional bond and still keep their taxes at the same amount and not increase taxes on the community. Is there any questions about this graph? Okay.
Just one thing I'd like to add, the qualified versus non-qualified.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, many school districts go qualify, which means they have to go through the state Treasury Department. They gotta go whole review process there because you're using their credit rating when you're going to sell those bonds. South Lyon Schools is not in that situation because of your good financial standing, so, kudos to all of you for doing that. It allows you to go non-qualified, which gives you a lot of advantages for flexibility and other advantages to the whole program. So I just want to make sure to point that out as a point of pride for you.
So we had Troon draft up 2 different versions of ballot language. We met as the art committee and reviewed both versions of the ballot language that Troon gave us regarding, we provided Troon Law Firm the scope of the work, all of PFM's financial data that we got on the bond, and they drafted this ballot language for us. We also took both versions of the ballot language to the Facilities Committee and had the Facilities Committee review both ballot language, and ultimately we chose, the Facilities Committee chose this one that's, you can see in front of you, to bring to the board for approval if you guys do approve on February 3rd to put on the ballot in May. This would be our official ballot language if it were approved.
And I think this is very, very similar, besides the bullet point format, the language is very
Yeah.
similar to the last program. It's very common language that's put in there. It does give you the maximum flexibility for programs, so if something did come along the way, similar, several years ago, they required all-day kindergarten. A lot of school districts, based on their ballot language, were able to do some modifications to their buildings so they could accommodate that all-day kindergarten. You never know when those things may come up that would force you to make a decision along the path, and this allows you, short of really extreme things, the most flexibility to your program. Yeah, I know, yeah, we'll get you a hard copy after this. How's that?
Oh, is it?
Thank you.
It's really
Yeah,
tiny.
we'll get that published out to you immediately, thanks. I made it as big as I could on the screen, though. Well, thank you, Stacy. So, just wrapping up with some next steps on the timeline. George, you want me to wrap this up, or you want to take it?
Am I wrapping this up?
If you'd like to.
I would love to.
Okay, it's all yours.
So we have been meeting. Tonight is your opportunity to have some final conversation around it. We did meet with the Facility Planning Committee to review this material and to review ballot language, and we'll see if they have any feedback they'd like to provide here at the table tonight. We have started some draft material around an informational campaign so that we'd be ready to hit the ground running if you give us permission in February. We are going to ask you at the February 3rd meeting to approve that ballot language, if you're okay with that, and then we'll get the campaign started from there. And election day would be May 5th, so we'd have a pretty tight campaign.
And I just wanted to add, just for clarification, Bonnet and Cassidy will be part of our campaign also. They are experts in this area of running campaigns, so they're not only did our focus panel, that was something that was excellent and helped with the process, but now they'll continue on for the next 15 weeks in the process, helping lead up with that, provide information, provide feedback, basically lessons learned or experience.
One of the things, just want to make sure that everyone's aware of, that absentee ballots are out on March 21st.
Right.
We have to have your whole story told prior to those absentee ballots being available. So we always like to say that the rubber band is stretching, and as soon as you call the election, we're gonna let it go, and we'll have the information campaign. We're already in the process of designing your information campaign.
And do we have a citizens committee, or have
We,
we started on that?
we're in the process of starting that. Ben and I had a great meeting on Friday with the past chair of the Citizens Committee. And we did a combination of brain dump and begging. I think we made progress on both accounts.
Excellent.
Good.
I just wonder if there's any feedback from the facility
Real quick, so
group.
what is the total estimated millage we're gonna need to cover the two issues? Because the .95 is for,
Currently, we are at 7.9 for debt mills that we levy. It started to fall off last July. So July of 2019, we actually dropped 0.10 or a tenth of a mil. So our existing debt is now starting to fall off. So I think that graph actually still declines that first year to 7.8. I don't have the PFM's specific charts, but they projected out very conservative 3%, 3% growth, and then it was 3% interest rate, I think. And so actually you can see that it starts to drop to 7, it's like, gosh, I don't have the graphs right in front of me, 7.8, 7.7 in those first 3 years of paying it, and then there's a big drop after that. I can't hardly see.
Down to 4. 4.
2024?
20.
It drops to 4 in 2024.
Yeah, so, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
what the estimated millage was going to be required
What we would
to
ask
cover
for
the
in
bond.
June.
7 point, it's not gonna increase over 7.9, what it's currently at, and it's gonna drop off
Are
in the
we at
next.
7.9 or 7.8? I thought we did drop a tenth, right?
Right, we were at 8.0,
Okay.
and then July of 2019, we dropped to 7.9. It will not increase over, I can't say that, you can't guarantee mills, because as property values
Right.
increase and decrease, you can't guarantee a mill, but we can guarantee that there won't be a property tax increase dollar-wise on the taxpayers, because if the house values drop, then the mills will go up just to collect the same amount of money.
Correct.
We will only be collecting the amount to pay the debt that we have, and so we will not be collecting more than what we currently collect right now.
7.9.
Based off of what's on the graph that she had in the presentation, it looks like the worst would be almost about 3 mils specifically for this, but then other debt starts dropping off.
Dropping off, right.
But that would be.
So that's the
specific
question
for it.
everybody asks, is what's
Yeah.
it gonna cost me, right?
Yeah.
Is there any feedback from the subcommittee?
Facilities? Any comments?
So we've already discussed it, the
We've discussed-
facilities.
Were there any
planning, so-
discussions at facilities that were?
Not really the last one. We were waiting, I mean, we had just gotten the feedback and hadn't really had a time to dive into it. We spent a lot of time talking about the FAQs and what we were hearing from the community and what we thought was important. You know, it's that top 10 list of the 50 questions that people are gonna have.
I think any questions that we had in committee came from the focus groups, which are many of the same questions that we've been, at least I've been hearing on the board for 3 years. Things that we know were coming up that we have to address. This is how we need to do that. There's been a lot of discussion in looking at the list of things we want to do and need to do at almost every single building in the district for some time.
Now, we're going to have a button on our website that you can just click and it says bond, and all this
Yep.
will
Yes, we are.
pop up beautifully.
Yep. Right above the superintendent search button, we're gonna put on the website too.
We have lots of added buttons this year.
Jenny, you want to talk about fans at all before we move on to anything else?
No, because you'd have to silence my mic.
Large ones.
We did have a discussion about cooling in the gyms.
Yes.
And as a person who works at a facility with gyms and a architecture background and construction background, gyms typically don't get air conditioning because it's extraordinarily high operation cost. But there are things, it's a large fan, big blank fan. BAF fan, they're very large.
There's
They have
somebody
an-
in a control room hitting a button right now.
I know, yeah, I know. Where it's interesting, they're almost like the size of a helicopter blades, but they move what looks like slowly, but they move a lot of air. So we looked at IDS and Barton Mallow to see if there was a way to look at something like that in the gyms, which will help keep operational costs down, but keep airflow and cooling moving. So it's been talked about and looked at. So all the questions and the comments and things in the focus groups, we have gone over in the facility groups, or the facility planning committee.
Great.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up, even though I said at the meeting, oh, I don't want to say this in front of everybody.
Those of us at the meeting were wondering how you were going to field that. Thank you.
Did I do all right?
Excellent
job.
All right.
Excellent.
There's no kids in the audience, so I was.
Good?
All right, we're good.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate your
Thank you
support.
so much.
Carrie, I do have one final thing before you guys leave. It's not necessarily connected to the bond per se, but one of the things that stood out to me in your report was the grades that you guys had requested, and particularly the facilities. It seemed like that one had a much lower grade point than everything else that you did. I was wondering, and I think we'd have to talk about it internally as a board before we move forward, but is that something where you could help us create a survey that we could do, I guess, before the bond happens, and then maybe we do it yearly after the bond goes in to see if we're raising that grade on facilities with this bond?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Okay.
We do a lot of community research along those lines, and there's a lot of really inexpensive ways that you can go about doing that and gathering that longitudinal data to be able to record change. And some of it can be done through, just right on your website, that we can help you craft something like that you can talk about the current condition, and as things improve and change, continue to get consumer feedback on that.
'Cause I'd just like to see if $98 million moves the bubble, or if it's, our people's expectations beyond what we can provide with the funding we have.
It's going to move the bubble, there's no question about that, but one of the things that we always tell clients is that once once the bond issue is passed, you can't stop talking about it. Because many of the people in your community, if they're not in your pool, they're not in your building, okay? So you have to make sure that you tell them and tell them and tell them again what's happening, how their dollars are being spent, how you're protecting the community's investment in the schools, and how student achievement and student learning is being improved by this investment. So it's very important to continue the conversation, and having just that little feedback thing that we can help you put on your website will allow you to keep that dialogue going. So we like I said, we tell our clients that once the election's over, now that part of the communication is done, but now we've got to keep people in the loop. Because there's no question, in the South Lyon community, you're growing, and you're going to continue to grow, and as that bubble, as Jeff said, gets up to the middle and high school, you're going to have to make sure that you're on target with the community, and the community knows that the bubble is continuing to grow, and you may have to bring something back in some future. So.
Thank you. So, Carrie, with that in mind, I think that would be a charge that, I would like to see the communications committee take up. And one of the stories I heard from Stacy and all of this is that as part of the presentations leading up to the focus group was telling the story of the school and how we're funded and all of that. And Stacy did share that several parents came up and were very thankful for that presentation, because they didn't know the constraints we had or how the funding worked or things like that. So I think it just kind of highlights that we as a school system or district really need to share our story a lot more than we are. And, you know, maybe we consider once a year holding a presentation in the auditoriums, inviting the community to come in and talk about or hear about finances and the challenges we face and all of that.
Yeah, no, that's a common thread. We had the same issue when we did the strategic plan.
Yeah.
Everyone who heard the story couldn't believe it, so.
So that might be an area where we could focus the communication side of the committee a little.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you to the Facilities Planning Committee and Central Office and all of you for all the hard work. I know it's been going on a long time, so looking forward to moving ahead.
Thank you. So do we give them permission to leave, or do we make them sit through the rest of our meeting too? Huh? What's practice here at South Lyon?
Oh, no, yeah, I would say
We allow them.
Oh, fine.
You're
Okay,
welcome,
I've got some really great information coming up, but I guess you're going to miss it. Under legislation, there's really nothing active moving in Lansing right now, but there are 3 threads of conversation that I just want you to keep in your mind. Now, there is conversation in Lansing around changing the Michigan merit curriculum that will allow for a little bit more local and family control around the elective area. Might increase some flexibility around math, that some people have been asking for around the Algebra 2 requirement. So we're going to keep our eyes on that. There continues to be conversation around the third grade reading legislation, not necessarily around the expectation, but around a retention piece to it. And that's something that people have to pay attention to, because those letters are scheduled to go out this June from MDE. About retention based on third grade M-STEP results. The third thread of conversation that's starting to pick up steam in Lansing is around a teacher shortage that we're all experiencing. And you heard about it tonight. There's been an opening in South Lyon since the beginning of the school year. And this is in suburban Detroit, right? This is a premier school district. And we've heard stories of that in other local districts too, that not only in special education, but even in areas of math and science that people are having trouble attracting quality candidates and keeping them there. So that's what's going on legislatively. And I'll just follow up real quickly with something that Craig said. That conversation around the school finance research collaborative and the weighted funding formula had a lot of steam last year and it stalled out in Lansing because of the road conversation being linked to it. That is the right way for public education in Michigan to move, because it fairly funds special education needs, at-risk needs, and students with English as a second language. And it's something that we've got to keep pushing our legislators to pay attention to as we move forward. And that would conclude the legislative report.
Okay, any comments on that? I had heard about I think a lot of the colleges are now offering teacher certification programs where you can get certified within 8 weeks and you can be hired as a
Well,
teacher.
that's an urban myth currently, but there is conversation around alternative certification programs. Wayne State University has a 15-month
Okay, our Schoolcraft has
program
one.
right now. Schoolcraft has one, so you're gonna hear more of those because the need's gonna increase.
Any other comments? Okay.
I have a number of updates. Just a quick update for the Oakland Technical Early College and Oakland Accelerated College Experience. Those, again, are the programs that we're partnering with Oakland schools for. This year, our students attend part of the high school experience, and then they attend courses at, in case of the technical college, the OTC programming and then the community college. And for the ACE program, half a high school day, and then the other half of it is a community college day. And those courses can fulfill both the high school requirements and start earning them credits toward an associate's degree. We do have a total of 8 students in the program, 6 in the early college experience and 2 in the early technical college. If you'll recall, we came forward and said we were going to pilot those programs this year. We would like to have more data in. We're just through their first semester of that before we bring anything formally. So if you have a high school student, you'll notice those will be listed in the course catalogs for students, again, still as a pilot program. So just a quick update on that. So far, it has gone very well. The feedback from our students is incredibly positive. It's a great way for them to learn about college and start getting comfortable with that, with a lot of supports in place. And for our families, if they're not aware, that is a totally free program for their students. They do need to provide their own transportation because they're not all taking the same college classes. But the books are included, the college credits are included. So it's an amazing program. It adds on a year of high school for our students, but it's a benefit to the students and to our district as well. So families should reach out if they're interested to the high school counseling offices, but we are listing that again in the course catalog, and I just wanted to make sure you all were aware. We're listing it as a pilot, and when we feel like we have a full year's worth of information, we'll bring it back for a formal approval.
So if it's a pilot, so students can still take it? but you're
Students can
only allowing
take it.
so
What we've
many?
said is, we would, if for some reason we really had reservations, we would allow students to finish out, but we wouldn't continue taking new ones in the next group. We're feeling very positively about the program, so we feel very comfortable taking another group of students through as the pilot.
Okay.
And then next up, our high school credit recovery program. So just another update on that. Our high schools are running that pilot program second semester. It is primarily for seniors who are deficient in credit, but it will include some juniors if there is space. Students will be provided with one or more online courses through Graduation Alliance. And as you know, Graduation Alliance is a program we already have a relationship with. They do some online course programming for our students who have dropped out of traditional high school or who needed an alternative placement. Those students will be working with the Graduation Alliance assigned online teacher, but they'll be in a classroom working with one of our staff members as well too. So they'll be getting support from both places. We're excited about that. We think it'll be about 30 students, potentially up to 30 at each of the two high schools. So we will try that out this year and see, with the hope being that potentially in the future we could be targeting students earlier in their high school career so they don't fall so behind.
So they started this already? Or
We are starting that
next-
second semester. Mhm. Anything else on that? Kindergarten and junior kindergarten registration. Next week, I will say it every single chance I get. The earlier families register their students, the better we can prepare for staffing, for classroom needs, for material needs. So that is next week. If families are registering for kindergarten, that is 7 p.m. at each one of the elementary schools next Thursday, January 30th. Junior kindergarten, we are doing one district-wide registration. That will be at Sayre at 5:30. So if families aren't sure which program is right for them, they can attend both because they are not at the exact same time. They could attend the junior kindergarten and then attend the kindergarten piece. And again, junior kindergarten is intended to capture a subset of students who otherwise would have been age eligible to attend kindergarten. So it's that waiver window group of kids whose parents could fill out the waiver to send them. And then summer birthdays if there is space. So if you've got questions, we just added it again to the top of the district website, so that's there again for information for families. But I will print flyers for whoever here knows somebody that is kindergarten age, and you can take that home with you. I sent a whole stack with Dan last time I saw him.
Is that something where, I guess the upcoming bond could be added to the script, just to get the initial awareness out
So
to the young families?
it's a little bit early in that process, but we did talk about some potential language, like watch for information coming, yes, because those
Or
are.
at least tell them that we're planning on it, and
So we've already kind of had that conversation, but you will not have formally
Right.
approved.
We're a little hesitant to
anything like that.
campaign before you actually give us
working
permission.
towards.
But keep in mind, information will be coming. So we will talk about what would be appropriate for that, but we are aware that's a great opportunity to capture a lot of families and students. And we did talk about other opportunities locally in the community where there are a lot of people in one place, where it would be a good timeline in which to do that. Kindergarten registration just is a little early. And then the last on my list is resident open enrollment. So currently, our district is using the language schools of choice to address both internal students who are moving from elementary school to elementary school and our out-of-district residents, or out-of-district people who are coming here for school. So whether that's 105, the districts in Oakland County, or 105C, the ones that are contiguous to the border of Oakland County. That language is a little confusing, and in a lot of districts, they use two separate sets of language. That is what our pupil accounting department has proposed. They would like to continue with the schools of choice language for out-of-district applicants. That is consistent with across the state of Michigan. And in district, they are recommending the term resident open enrollment to clarify very clearly that that is only for residents to allow them to move from one elementary school to another when there is room in the enrollment. So that is the language we will use moving forward. We do anticipate in this first year that will be a little confusing for families, but we anticipate that in the long run, that will really help us clarify some things about which set of paperwork people need to fill out and who qualifies for different procedures and practices that we do along those lines. Any questions on the language change to that? And then the other piece that is of concern is we do have a lot of families that are looking to do that resident open enrollment piece at Hardy. And Hardy is a building that has some special considerations. So in addition to also housing one of our junior kindergarten programs, it houses 55 students who are in the cognitively impaired or emotionally impaired programs. So we do have those students pushing in for part of their day into the general education classrooms, as much of their day as we can manage. And then we do have 2 combination classrooms there right now, a 2-3 combination and a 4-5 combination. So imagine, if you will, for a moment, you are a teacher who does not have one of the combination classrooms. You have students coming to you for 4th grade science and social studies, but also students coming from the EI and CI classrooms. So that is creating a little bit of a logistics issue at Hardy. It is not to the point where we need to deny all resident open enrollment, so what we are proposing is a step in that direction to phase that out at that building to allow for some more space. We do not need to overnight say no one can go there anymore for the resident open enrollment, but what would make sense is to say if your family is already a Hardy family, you've already done what we used to refer to as school of choice. You might have a 2nd grader and a 4th grader there, and you've got an incoming kindergartner. We would allow you to enroll that incoming kindergartner under the resident open enrollment, and your family would finish out your time at Hardy. If you don't already have that connection to Hardy, it would not be open for you to go there. So if you are moving to the district and you're looking for a late start elementary school, Hardy wouldn't be a choice you could pick. But if you already have that established relationship for kindergarten through 4th grade at Hardy, current kindergarten through 4th grade, we would allow your family to finish out, but we wouldn't take new applications. We've discussed this with the enrollment committee, we discussed this with the administration team, we discussed this with the Hardy administrator as well too. It seems to be the way that allows families to retain that relationship and staff to really continue working with the families they know while still honoring the fact that that building has some enrollment challenges. And this would certainly help us to address that. What questions do you have for me on that?
We've done that in the past.
In the past, it has not been a phase-out. It has been as we open new buildings, we've closed other places. This would be a little bit longer of a process, but there is not a need to say that the 66 students who currently are resident open enrollment, what used to be schools of choice, we don't need to turn away 66 students. So it makes the most sense to say if you've already got that established relationship, we'll allow you to finish out, but we're not taking new applications from families. And then regarding that, the plan is to communicate that, obviously it's here, and then as the forms come out around kindergarten registration is typically when we push out that previously schools of choice, now resident open enrollment form. We'll explain the why within that as well too, so families understand. And then probably some very targeted language to the Hardy families in terms of a Skylar, letting them know like this will be your process. We did not continue that with junior kindergarten because junior kindergarten is currently at 6 of our elementary schools. And if your oldest child at Hardy is in junior kindergarten, they were placed there because that was your list of choices. Many students are in a junior kindergarten program that is not their boundary school this year. So that made sense to say to those families, you can either return to your boundary school or pick another location, but we are not allowing those families to start the process with Hardy.
Okay,
Okay?
Thank you.
okay. With that, board committee reports, legislative.
With everything that's been going on, I haven't had the opportunity to attend any of the legislative committee meetings. I will endeavor to do that going forward. I have a little concern over the blurring of the lines now between the legislative committee and this new group of districts on the east side of the county that are pushing the Oakland Schools Enhancement Millage. So it's kind of like the same players running both operations. So I know that Dr. Heisch and I've had some conversation that that particular push probably would not be good for South Lyon. And matter of fact, they had another meeting of that enhancement millage group this evening, which obviously nobody could attend, but not that I'm sure that how we're gonna handle that going forward, but that's something we're gonna have to deal with. And the board's gonna have to develop, I guess, an opinion or a strategy how we wanna deal with that. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Plus their January meeting, usually they talk about their trips to DC. So-
That was, well, this seems to, this new
Has taken over.
millage seems to be occupying a lot of their time along with the trip, so we'll see.
All right, policy. Tony, you want to talk about it?
Sure. So we're in the midst of reviewing the administrative guidelines that go with our brand-new set of district policies. Covered a lot of ground today, caught a lot of little details here and there, had some good discussion. We need to get some things, we'll get you up to speed, Mr. Clark, when we meet again. Make sure we get anything that you found from the areas that we covered. But I think we are, what did you say? You think we're more than halfway through, aren't we?
Pick up at 6,000, so we did very well. Everybody did a great job with their homework, so we made a lot of progress.
Excellent. Finance,
We had our last meeting on December 9th. We discussed the budget amendment that was passed tonight. Our next meeting will be on February 3rd.
excellent. And facilities planning?
That was it.
Yeah. The fans.
And the fans.
And curriculum and communications?
We worked on and finished up our slogan and logo. We'll bring that somewhere in February to who that needs to go to make that happen. And we have penned an actual charge for the committee in detail, so that'll come next month.
Okay. Side note on the board committee reports, there had been some discussion about the board approving committee meeting minutes. And I talked to Mr. Banasek from MASB, and he said that the individual committees should approve their own meeting minutes, but that it would be very helpful if we maybe included them in our board packet, so they would be public record, and so everyone have an opportunity to see those, because they're kind of a little bit more difficult to find on our website, so we'll probably add them just to our agendas from here on out.
So as clarification on that, the beginning of the committee meeting should have a agenda item to approve the previous minutes then?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I have two others, if I could. One, we have a student reinstatement request, so I need to have people, if you're available, check your calendars for next Monday at 6 o'clock, Monday the 27th. We'd like to hold that student reinstatement hearing then, if that's possible. And while you're doing that, the other that I have is just that if you think back to the 6:30 presentation on really social and emotional and mental health for our students, and then a later conversation around the bond issue, it's sometimes hard for people in the community to connect those two things together, but they're linked. Because as you pass a bond issue and you take care of facilities and you relieve pressure on the general fund, you provide opportunities for teachers to find space to think about social and emotional health. And we're learning that that may be the most important conversation we're going to have over the next decade, public education. We spend a lot of time worrying about finance and worrying about some other things, but the social and emotional health and the impacts of trauma on our students and our staff in some ways is going to be one of those leading trends for the next decade. So I thank you for taking the time to do that because it validated the work that they're doing at East around Genius Hour. And what you saw and was demonstrated at East today, those conversations are happening in every other building that you have. So thank you.
Did you want a response to that
Yeah,
meeting
can we
date?
get a response
Yep.
for the?
How do you do that?
I'm available.
I'm available.
Monday, the 27th.
Monday, the 27th
Yep.
at 6 o'clock, if we could.
Good.
I'm good.
I can make it.
Probably, I'm not 100%. I gotta,
We
but I
have-
think you got
We
everybody.
have five,
You
so
got
we have,
five, yeah.
these five can do it for sure. Mr. Kennedy?
I'm good.
You're good.
Thank you.
Okay, item 14, our reports. We have our South Lyon Educational Foundation. Tony, were you able to make the meeting last night?
I was not able to make the meeting last night.
I know they had a meeting last night, and I know they are working on the fashion show.
Yeah, they're working on a new, they're porting everything over to a new website as well.
Okay.
There was some issues with the way the other one functioned and the cost and so forth, so I think they're making progress on that.
And I know we have a new foundation board president, Michelle Tomei, I think, has taken over. Thank you to Brad Marley for all of his very hard work, and we wish him well. I don't think anything else on that. We also have our monthly financial reports that are available on the website. With that, item 15, public comment. Don't have any cards, but if anyone would like to say anything. No? Correspondence, we have one resignation. Item 17, our meeting dates are posted all the way through the end of the year. And item 18, board comments. Mr. Kennedy, would you like to start?
Sure. I don't really have a whole lot because everything that we've talked about in committee, we've discussed here, thanks to my fellows on the committees who've put in a lot of extra time. Bannock, Cassidy, Barton, Mallow folks, IDS folks. We've made a lot of headway. Welcome to our new president and secretary. And congratulations and thanks to our outgoing president. Thank you. Appreciate your input.
All right, Mr. President?
I'm actually really glad to see that, and one of the numbers I'll be talking about with the communities is that it started at 130 million. We're asking for 98, and I know it's a large number, but it shows fiscal conservative policies, and I think that's really important for people to understand. We're not just asking for money for money. We're doing what needs to be done, and that's about it. So I really enjoyed that presentation. Randy, thank you again for your leadership during my short tenure here so far. It's been appreciated, and congrats to everybody else.
Mr. Bobby?
Thanks. Thanks so much to everybody who has put in all the effort up to this point to get us where we are in the bond work. It's amazing sometimes. There's so much that happens behind the scenes, and to hear her say we're already working on your literature and the campaign behind the scenes that's been going on. It's amazing work. It's a lot of work. First meeting in the calendar year. I'm excited for the year ahead. We have a couple of massive challenges ahead of us in finding leadership and getting through the bond. But those are great opportunities to be very successful in both things. Really good group of people all the way around here, I think, that to help us get through it. Welcome to Dr. Heitz in your first meeting. We appreciate having you here. And I'm just going to come out and take the very controversial stance of being pro-dog. I am. Let's get a dog. That's all I'm saying. Randy, thank you very much for the last couple of years. You put in a lot of time and a lot of effort, and it didn't go unnoticed or unappreciated. We appreciate it very much.
Mr. Tell?
Yeah, so first meeting of 2020, so welcome back. Good luck to all the students. The next 3 days are midterms. I think parents are probably just as nervous as the kids. Welcome to the new officers, and thank you to the officers that are out. Just Randy, right?
Yeah.
So they'll switch, yep. So a little extra free time for Mr. Clark. I hope everybody was able to get some good information on the bond, and I also liked the dog. I thought that was kind of fun. So, I guess that's it. Happy New Year.
Mr. Dashner?
Like everyone else, I want to say thanks to Randy. Just definitely appreciated all the effort you put in over the course of the year that I've been here. Congrats to all the new officers. I'd like to say thanks to Judy. I mean, she continues keeping us loaded up with paper, and I can't imagine how much work it is for her to get all that done. I've been able to catch some basketball games, so winter sports is in. It's fun watching the kids doing that. I really like my pass, so I can get in those for free. I just stop in for random times. I also wanted to thank Karen Fisher. I really think that Genius Hour was a good thing. It's cool to see the outcome of that with the presentation from Michelle and Jeremy on the Zen Room. That seems like a really nice idea. And then also Catherine with the therapy dogs, and really appreciate coming in here to kind of explain it a little bit. Sounds like a pretty interesting program, although I could see a bunch of different areas fighting over use of the dog at the same time. But
Like trump cards.
yes, very much so. But I could definitely see a value in that. It'd be neat to be able to do some type of a survey before or after and see if there's any tangible results from it. But I can see how it's a de-stressor.
Absolutely. Mr. Clark?
Well, thank you to the board for the opportunity to let me serve for 3 years as president. It was a challenge, and with that, good luck, Mrs. Sanchez. It's a tremendous amount of work, and I'm sure you're up to it. I want to really thank Judy for the extra work that she's putting in on the superintendent search preparations, and Dr. Heitz for assisting her, because I know Our search consultant has dumped a lot on her plate, and I know it's quite full. So thank you, Judy, for all your hard work and all the help you've provided to me over the years, so appreciate that. I think we've got a good group of officers. It's going to move forward really well, and we have a lot of work ahead of us.
Yes, we do.
That's it. Thank you.
With that, welcome to Dr. Heitch. And I've
Thank you.
already been working on quite a few things already, so it's going to be a good year. A quick side note, MDE is doing a strategic plan survey, and it's open for anyone. It's on michigan.gov/top10 in 10, so anyone can go and leave their input on that. I wanted to thank East for their presentation. I do think the social emotional stuff is going to be the most important, and it's good to see the teachers and the staff working, thinking outside of the box on ways to do things, especially if they don't cost us very much as a district. Excellent bond presentation. I think they really did handle all the main questions, and I think that we have a strong story to tell the community, and I think we should be proud to do that. And finally, thank you to Mr. Clark for his time as president, and thank you to all of you for the opportunity for myself. And with that, I will have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support.
Clark, supported by Mr. Dashner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 7-0.